The smell was wrong. Geralt noticed it 3 hours into the cellar, repair a metallic sharpness underneath the familiar rot of old stone and standing water, underneath the smell of the keep itself. Underneath everything, the keep had accumulated in its centuries of existence. Not iron, not the copper of blood or the sulfur of alchemy reagents seeping through the floor from the laboratory above. Something else. Something that didn't have a name in any catalog of scents he'd built across a century of following his nose into places that turned out to contain things that wanted to kill him. He stopped working, set down the chisel. The medallion moved. Not the gentle vibration it produced near minor magical disturbances, the ambient chaos of a keep full of witchers and their equipment, the old enchantments in the walls that the founders had layered into the stone. This was different, a steady, violent hum that transferred through the chain into his collarbone, the metal warm against his skin in a way it shouldn't have been in a cellar this cold. He put his hand flat against the wall. The stone was vibrating. Not randomly, not the irregular tremor of structural instability or the organic pulse of something living in the rock. A precise, regular vibration, the same interval, the same intensity, repeating with a consistency that nothing natural produced. Machinery produced that kind of consistency. But there was no machinery in Kaer Morhen's cellar. There was old stone and older rot, and the bones of the keep's foundation, which he was supposed to be repairing because winter was 6 weeks out, and Vesemir had decided the east wall couldn't wait another season. He pressed harder. The vibration didn't change. It didn't respond to pressure, didn't shift under his hand, didn't behave like magic behaved when a witcher touched it. Magic was responsive. It pushed back. It flared. It recognized the contact and reacted to it. Whatever was producing this vibration recognized nothing and reacted to nothing. It was simply running. Had been running from the feel of it for a very long time. He stepped back and looked at the wall. The stones were perfectly fitted, too perfectly. The standard for Kaer Morhen's construction was good, but not this good, not the seamless precision he was looking at now. Not joints so tight that no moisture had penetrated them in what must have been centuries. A different hand had laid these stones, a different standard, a different purpose. He drew a blade, silver, habit. The medallion's hum intensified the moment the blade came out, not in the way it intensified near monsters, which was a specific frequency he knew completely, but in the way it intensified when it was overwhelmed, when whatever it was detecting was so far outside the parameters it had been designed for, that the enchantment was simply running at maximum and staying there. He hit the wall with the pommel. The sound it made was not stone. He found Vesemir in the armory. The old witcher was oiling leatherwork with the focused patience he brought to every maintenance task, the patience of someone who had been doing the same tasks for longer than most people lived and had made peace with the patience. Repetition. He looked up when Geralt came in, read something in Geralt's expression, and set down the oil. "The cellar?" Geralt said. "What about it?" "There's something behind the east wall." He paused. "The medallion won't stop." Vesemir looked at the medallion. It was visibly vibrating against Geralt's chest, not subtly, not in the way that required attention to notice, but with the amplitude of a struck bell that hadn't finished ringing. "How long has it been doing that?" Vesemir said. "Since I touched the wall," Geralt said. 3 hours ago." Vesemir set down the leather entirely. He looked at Geralt with an expression Geralt hadn't seen on his face before. Not surprise. Something older than surprise. Recognition, almost. The expression of someone hearing a word in a language they'd half forgotten. "Show me," he said. They stood in front of the wall for a long time. Vesemir had his hands on the stone and his eyes closed, and the specific stillness of a witcher doing a full sensory scan, every enhanced sense directed at the surface, reading everything it could give. Geralt watched him and said nothing. The medallion hummed between them. "I've felt this before," Vesemir said finally. "When?" "Once. A long time ago. He opened his eyes. "I found a chamber in the mountains east of Hage. 60 years ago, maybe more. Stone construction, but the jointing was wrong, same as this. I went in." He paused. There was nothing inside. Just walls and a floor and a ceiling, and in the center of the floor, a depression in the stone, shaped like nothing I could name. The medallion behaved exactly like this. "What did you do?" Geralt said. "I left," Vesemir said. "And I never went back. And I never wrote it in any record, because I didn't know what to write." He looked at the wall. "I've thought about it maybe 100 times since. I never found a category for it." Geralt looked at the wall. "We should go in," he said. "Yes," Vesemir said. "We probably should." He pressed both palms flat against the stone. Nothing. Geralt pressed both palms flat beside Vesemir's. Nothing. Then the medallion produced a frequency it had never produced before. Not the hum of a monster nearby, or the vibration of a magical disturbance, but something new. A resonance that Geralt felt in his back teeth and behind his eyes simultaneously, and the wall responded. Not to Vesemir's hands, to Geralt's. The stones separated with a precision that made no sound, no grinding, no scraping, no structural complaint of ancient material in motion. They moved the way a mechanism moved, each piece sliding into a position that something had designed it for, the geometry of the separation too regular to be anything except intentional. The wall became a door, and the door opened inward. Cold air came out, not the cold of an enclosed space, the cold of something that had been maintaining a specific temperature for a very long time and was now meeting the warmer air of the cellar at the threshold between them. The metallic smell was stronger, much stronger. Light came from inside, not torchlight, not the blue-white of magical illumination. Something that had no color in the conventional sense, a light that was cold in the way that stars were cold, the light of something that produced illumination as a byproduct of its function rather than as a purpose. They stood in the doorway and looked in. The chamber was large. Larger than the cellar above suggested was possible. The keep's east wall ran directly above this space, and the dimensions didn't fit the foundation, which meant the chamber predated the keep, which meant the keep had been built on top of it, which meant someone who built Kaer Morhen had known it was here. In the center of the chamber, floating 1 meter above a floor of the same impossible jointed stone as the walls, was a sphere. 2 meters across, perfectly spherical, a surface of shifting plates, obsidian dark material, moving in slow patterns that had no randomness in them. The plates rearranging constantly in configurations that Geralt's eye kept trying to resolve into something recognizable and couldn't. The cold light came from the gaps between the plates, from whatever was inside. The medallion was producing a sound now, not a vibration, a sound, above the threshold of hearing, a tone so pure and sustained that it didn't seem like metal making it. "Geralt," Vesemir said. "I see it," Geralt said. "What is it?" Geralt looked at the sphere, at the shifting plates, at the cold light from inside. He looked at the walls of the chamber, which were covered in geometric patterns, cut into the stone with the same precision as the jointing, not decorative, functional, the patterns of something that served a purpose rather than an aesthetic. He looked at the floor around the sphere's base, which was marked with a circular depression identical to the one Vesemir had found in the mountains east of Hage 60 years ago. He looked at all of it. "I have no idea," he said. He stepped inside. The door didn't close behind him, but the sphere's plates shifted, all of them simultaneously, a new configuration, and the light from inside changed frequency, and the medallion stopped humming and produced instead a single sustained note that Geralt had never heard it make. The sphere knew he was there. He walked toward it. The floor under his boots was cold in a way that came through the leather and the wool and reached his skin directly, the cold of something that had been held at this temperature deliberately. The geometric patterns on the walls caught the sphere's light and held it, each pattern illuminated in sequence as he passed, not randomly, in the order of his approach, the patterns responding to his movement through the chamber. He stopped 2 meters from the sphere. This close, he could hear it. Not the medallion's tone, the sphere itself, a sound so low that he felt it in his chest rather than heard it with his ears. The sound of something that had been running for a very long time, that had been waiting for something and was now detecting whether what had arrived was what it had been waiting for. He reached out his hand. The sphere's plates shifted one more time. And then a voice came from inside it, from the cold light, from whatever was at the center, in a language that no human on the continent had ever spoken, in a tone that was not threatening and was not welcoming and was something older and more specific than either. It was asking a question. Geralt didn't understand a word of it. But the medallion, for the first time in his life, went completely silent. The sentinel came through the wall. Not through a door, through the wall itself, the stone parting around it the way the cellar wall had parted when Geralt pressed his hands against it. The same mechanism, the same precision. It was 2 meters tall, and it had no face, and it was built from the same dark material as the sphere's shifting plates, its surface moving in the same slow patterns, the cold light bleeding from its joints. Geralt had his silver blade out before it fully cleared the stone. He hit it across what should have been its neck. The blade skidded off. Not the resistance of armor, the specific rejection of incompatible materials, the blade finding no purchase on a surface that simply wasn't affected by silver. The medallion was silent. Not because there was no threat, because the threat wasn't magic, and the medallion had nothing to say about things that weren't magic. The sentinel's arm came around faster than something its size should move. Geralt dropped under it and drove the blade into the joint between its torso and what served as its hip, the gap in the moving plates, the only discontinuity in its surface. The blade went in 3 centimeters and stopped. The sentinel grabbed him by the chest plate and threw him into the wall. He hit stone and came off it already moving, the Witcher reflexes doing their work below the level of decision. The sentinel tracked him not with eyes, it had no eyes, with something that detected his movement regardless of where in the chamber he was. Silver doesn't work, Vesemir said from the floor where he'd gone when the sentinel emerged. He had his own blade out. He'd already reached the same conclusion. He hadn't tried a strike. He was watching Geralt's and learning from the result. I noticed, Geralt said. Ciri had moved to the far wall. The sphere's plates were moving rapidly now, the fastest configuration yet. The cold light strobing in a pattern that wasn't random, it was communicating something, or trying to. The sentinel moved toward Geralt again. He sidestepped, got behind it, drove both fists into the joint at its upper back with the full force of Witcher augmentation behind the blow. The sentinel stumbled forward one step. Vesemir, Geralt said. Dimeritium. A pause. I have a bomb. Throw it. The dimeritium bomb detonated against the sentinel's torso, and the effect was immediate, not damage, disruption. The sentinel's surface plates locked, the slow movement freezing mid-configuration, the cold light from its joints sputtering. It stopped moving for 3 full seconds. Geralt hit the locked joint at its neck with everything he had. The joint cracked. The sentinel went to one knee. It disrupts the field, Geralt said. The dimeritium disrupts whatever is running through it. We have 4 more bombs between us, Vesemir said, and I don't know how many more of those things are in the walls. The sentinel was already recovering, the plates unlocking, the light restabilizing, the movement returning. We need something better, Geralt said. Ciri was at the sphere, not touching it, standing close, the cold light moving across her face, her hands at her sides. The sphere was doing something it hadn't done before. The plates were separating in sequence around a specific point, creating an aperture in the sphere's surface. Inside the aperture, visible for the first time, was something that looked less like machinery and more like a shape, a form, the Forerunner inside, awaiting. "Ciri," Geralt said, "get away from it." "It's trying to stop the sentinel," she said. "It can't from inside. The containment keeps it in, and it keeps the other thing contained. And, if it opens fully, Ma." "What other thing?" Geralt said. The sphere's light flickered again, longer this time. The sentinel turned away from Geralt and moved toward the sphere, toward Ciri. Geralt got in front of it. Lambert and Eskel came down 20 minutes into the engagement. They'd felt the medallions activate from the practice yard and had armed up before they reached the cellar stairs, arriving at the chamber entrance to find Geralt and Vesemir holding a line between two sentinels. A second had come through the north wall, while the first was still moving, and Ciri pressed against the sphere with the cold light surrounding her and the sphere in a state of activation that neither Witcher had a category for. Lambert looked at the sentinels. "What are those?" he said. "Unknown," Geralt said. "Silver doesn't work. Dimeritium disrupts them temporarily. We have 2 bombs left. Racket." Unquote. Con. "I have 6, Eskel said. He was already moving, reading the engagement geometry, finding his angle. Lambert looked at the sphere, at Ciri, at the aperture that had partially opened and the shape visible inside it. "Is that?" "Later," Geralt said. Lambert pulled a bomb from his belt and hit the closer sentinel with it. The plates locked. Eskel took the immobile sentinel's joint at the knee with a blade, and it went down. The first sentinel turned toward the sound of the engagement, and Geralt drove a blade into its locked neck joint with enough force that this time the joint didn't just crack, it separated. The sentinel dropped. The second recovered from the dimeridium and rose. "One up," Lambert said, backing toward the sphere. The sphere's light pulsed, and the sentinel stopped. Not from a bomb, from the sphere. The pulse had gone outward through the chamber, through the floor, through the stone, and the sentinel had received it and had stopped the way machinery stopped when the signal running it was interrupted. It stood in the middle of the chamber, plate still, light dim, waiting for a signal that wasn't coming anymore. The sphere had reasserted control over its own sentinel. It had taken everything it had to do it. The aperture in the sphere's surface was wider now, more of the interior visible, more of the form inside. Geralt could see it clearly for the first time. A figure, armored, massive by human standards, folded into the sphere's interior in the specific posture of something that had been placed there deliberately and had been holding that posture for a very long time. A face. Not human. The proportions were wrong, too large, the features too regular, the symmetry too precise. But recognizable as a face, in the way that all faces were recognizable, the specific configuration of a being that had looked at things and thought about what it saw. It was looking at Ciri. "It's waking up," she said. "How long?" Geralt said. "I don't know." She paused. "It's been in there a long time." She searched for the word. "The process takes time." "The other thing," Geralt said. "The contamination. Where is it?" The sphere's light flickered a third time. This one lasted longer. And in the space of the flicker, in the moment when the cold light dropped to almost nothing, and the chamber was lit only by the dimeridium's residual glow and the torches Lambert had brought down, Geralt felt something. Not the medallion. Something beneath the medallion's range. Something that operated in the register of the nightmares that the Witcher mutations didn't fully suppress. The deep animal awareness of a predator, detecting something that had no physical form but was present anyway, the way cold was present, in a space before the air temperature dropped enough for the body to register it. Something in the chamber with them, had been in the chamber with them since before they arrived, was aware of them, was aware of Ciri, was aware of the sphere waking and the Forerunner inside it stirring toward consciousness after its long wait. And it was not pleased. "Vesemir," Geralt said quietly. "I feel it," Vesemir said. He was standing completely still, every sense directed inward, the expression of a Witcher doing a full read on something that wasn't registering on any of the normal channels. It's not magical. It's not physical. He stopped. It's grief. Geralt looked at him. Whatever is in here with us. Vesemir said, it is made of grief. Someone's grief. A very large amount of it accumulated over a very long time. He paused. And it is looking at us. The torch Lambert had brought guttered. In the far corner of the chamber, in the shadows that the sphere's light didn't reach, something moved. Nothing physical. Just the shadows themselves, shifting, deepening, taking on a quality that shadows didn't normally have, a density, a presence. And from the sphere, from the waking Forerunner inside it, a sound emerged that wasn't the low mechanical hum they'd been hearing since the chamber opened. A word, one word, in the language that nobody on the continent spoke, directed at the shadows in the corner. A warning. The shadows stilled. For now. What did it say? Lambert said. Ciri was very pale. It said not yet, she said. It is not your time yet. And what's in the corner? Lambert said. Something that disagrees, Geralt said. The Forerunner took 3 hours to wake. Nobody left the chamber. Geralt stood between the sphere and the corner where the shadows had thickened and stayed thick, not moving, not advancing, but present in the specific way of something that was waiting for its moment and was patient enough to wait correctly. The remaining sentinels stood dormant against the north wall, plates still, under whatever hold the sphere had reasserted. Lambert and Eskel held the chamber entrance. Vesemir read the founding records. Ciri stayed near the sphere and watched the aperture widen in increments as the waking process continued. The cold light steadied as the hours passed. The flickering stopped. Whatever the contamination was doing, the sphere's growing coherence was containing it. The Forerunner inside, coming back to full consciousness, and the increasing consciousness pushing back against what had been leaking into the containment field during the long absence of awareness. At the 3-hour mark, the sphere's plates retracted fully. The Forerunner stepped out. Geralt's first assessment was tactical. 3 meters tall, armored in the same dark material as the sentinels, but different shaped for a specific body rather than constructed as a general form. The armor fitted to the figure inside it, the way good leather was fitted, every joint articulated for the range of movement of the being wearing it. The armor's surface moved like the sphere's plates had moved, the slow patterns of something that was running constantly, maintaining constantly. It looked at the chamber. It looked at the damaged wall where the sentinels had emerged. It looked at the scored floor from the dimeritium bombs and the separated joint of the destroyed sentinel. It looked at Lambert and Eskel at the entrance, and Vesemir with the records, and Geralt between it and the corner. Then it looked at Ciri. It went to one knee. Not submission recognition, the specific gesture of something, acknowledging what it had been waiting for, the formal quality of a ritual that had been preserved through 10,000 years of isolation in a sphere. Ciri looked at Geralt. Geralt looked at the kneeling Forerunner. Don't, he said to her. Don't what? Whatever it wants you to do next. It couldn't speak any language they knew. This was established in the first 10 minutes. The Forerunner attempted 4 languages in sequence, each one the structured cadence of a being that was used to being understood, each one producing nothing in the Witchers except the same blankness. Ciri could feel the shape of what it was saying, the emotional register, but not the content. McKay would have said this was a problem. Geralt said nothing. He watched the Forerunner try to communicate and assessed what the trying told him about what he was dealing with. It was not aggressive. Every movement was deliberate and controlled. The movements of something that understood it, was in a room full of people who couldn't fully understand it, and was managing its own behavior accordingly. It was frustrated that came through clearly, the quality of someone who had been waiting 10,000 years for this specific moment and was now in the moment and couldn't talk. It was also watching the corner. Every few minutes, its attention went to the thickened shadows and stayed there for a moment before returning to the room. Geralt read the quality of those glances. Not fear, wariness. The specific wariness of something that knew what was in the corner and had a formed opinion about it. "Ciri," Geralt said, "ask it about the corner." "I told you, I can't." "The shape of it," he said. "Feel for the shape of what it thinks about the corner." She looked at the Forerunner, closed her eyes. A long moment. "Old," she said. "It thinks about the corner, and what it feels is old, very old, older than itself." She paused, angry at something that was done to it. Something the records call, she stopped. The word isn't a name, it's a concept. The word means unmade, something that was unmade against its will. "What was unmade?" Geralt said. "Its body," Ciri said. "Whatever is in that corner had its physical form taken from it, deliberately, as a weapon." She opened her eyes. "And it has been in this chamber since before the conjunction, trapped in the containment field, with nothing to occupy itself, except everything that happened in this keep above it." Lambert looked at the corner. "All the deaths," he said. He meant the massacre. Every Witcher remembered it differently, and nobody talked about it directly, but it was always present in the keep, in the empty rooms, the unused beds, the practice yard that should have held 50 students, and held 4 decades of that. Decades of an old man in a keep, built for hundreds. The grief of it soaking into the stone, the way damp soaked into stone. "It fed on that," Vesemir said. He wasn't looking at the founding records anymore. He was looking at the corner. "All this time, our grief. My grief." His voice was flat and precise. "And now it knows us. Everything that happened here. Every person. Every loss." The shadows in the corner moved. Not advancing. Responding to being discussed, the specific movement of something that knew it was being talked about. Geralt tightened his grip on the blade that was useless against it. The Forerunner solved the communication problem at hour 4. It went to the wall and pressed its hand against the geometric patterns there, and the patterns responded, lighting under its touch, in sequence, the script that matched the founding records, illuminating section by section. Then it looked at Ciri and pressed its other hand to the center of the pattern cluster, the complex shape that anchored the surrounding text and held the position. The sphere produced a hologram, not the galaxy map. Something more specific, a sequence of images rendered in the cold light, showing events in an order that was clearly meant to be read as a history. The images were stylized, rather than photorealistic. The Forerunner aesthetic of clean lines and geometric precision applied to narrative illustration. Geralt watched it. The first images showed a civilization vast, structured, the specific quality of something that had reached a level of development that made the continent's most advanced city look primitive. Then, a war. The images of the war were not detailed. They showed scale rather than specifics, the sense of a conflict that encompassed everything rather than a battle between armies. Then, a weapon. The image of the weapon was the most detailed thing in the sequence. A ring. Massive beyond any scale that Geralt had a reference for a structure that dwarfed planets, rendered in the hologram with the cold precision of something the illustrator had understood completely. The ring firing. The firing produced an effect that the subsequent images showed, spreading outward in every direction from every ring simultaneously. Everything is dying. Then, survival. Pockets of survival. Dimensional folds. The images showed space folding around surviving populations, the continent's dimensional structure, visible for what it was. A fold in something larger that had closed before the firing's effect could fully penetrate. Then, the sphere. The Forerunner entered it deliberately, the chamber being built, the sphere being placed inside, waiting. Then, a bloodline. Images of generations, each one passing something forward to the next. The elder blood moving through human populations across centuries until it reached Ciri, her face in the hologram, rendered in cold light, accurate enough that Lambert looked between the image and the real Ciri with visible discomfort. "That's you," Lambert said. "I know," Ciri said. The hologram continued. It showed the Forerunner emerging from the sphere, showed Ciri receiving something, an object, transferred from the Forerunner's hand to hers. Showed what happened after the transfer, and this part of the hologram Geralt watched with the specific attention of someone whose job was to identify threats. What happened after the transfer was large. "What is it giving you?" Geralt said. Ciri was watching the hologram. "Access," she said, "to something the Forerunner built before it went into the sphere. Before the weapon fired. It was preparing for afterward, for after the firing, after the survival, after the reconstruction. It built something, and it needs a reclaimer to activate it." "What did it build?" Geralt said. Ciri watched the hologram show it. The continent. Every monster on it, mapped in the hologram, the creatures that had come through in the conjunction, and the creatures that had evolved here since, and the creatures that nobody had fully classified. All of them mapped. And beneath the map, in the dimensional substrate of the continent itself, a network, the same network that the galaxy map had shown but localized, fitted to the continent's specific dimensional topology. A network built to do something specific to the continent's remaining monsters. "It built a solution," Ciri said, "to the monsters, all of them." She looked at Geralt. "Not a weapon, a call. Something that would call the monsters, that could be called back to wherever they came from in the conjunction, and seal the passages, and end it. End the need for witchers." The chamber was very quiet. Geralt looked at the hologram, at the network beneath the continent, at the Forerunner's solution to the monster problem. Built 10,000 years ago and placed in a sphere, in a cellar, in a keep that hadn't been built yet, and waited for someone with the elder blood to come and activate it. He looked at the Forerunner. It was watching him. He had the specific feeling of being read, not magically, not by any means he could name, but the way any intelligent being read another intelligent being when it needed to understand where the resistance was coming from. "You," he said to it, knowing it couldn't understand him, "you built a solution that makes witchers unnecessary." He paused. "And you put it in the hands of the one person, I." He stopped. Lambert was looking at him. Eskel was looking at him. Vesemir wasn't looking at anyone. "Geralt," Ciri said. "I know," he said. "I know what I'm supposed to say, that it doesn't matter. That if it ends the monster problem, then that's what matters." He looked at the hologram, at her face in it, at the image of the transfer, at what happened after. "Tell me what happens to you when you activate it." Ciri looked at the hologram. Long enough that the answer wasn't nothing. "Tell me," he said. "The Forerunner designed the activation to work through the Reclaimer's connection to the network," she said carefully. "It uses the Elder Blood as the interface. The activation draws on," she stopped. "It uses a significant portion of what I am to run, the chaos, the dimensional sensitivity, everything the Elder Blood is." She paused. "And the Forerunner designed it before it understood what the conjunction would do to the surviving populations. Before it understood that the Reclaimer bloodline would develop in people who were," she looked for the word, "people who were people, not just carriers." "How much?" Geralt said. She didn't answer. "Ciri, how much?" "All of it," she said. "The activation uses all of it. The Elder Blood, the chaos, the dimensional sensitivity, all of it, to run the network once and seal everything and end the monster problem." She looked at him. "It would work. It would do exactly what it was built to do. And afterward, I would be ordinary," Geralt said. "Human," she said. "Just human." The Forerunner was still watching Geralt. Geralt looked at it. "No," he said. He said it to the Forerunner that couldn't understand him. He said it to the hologram, showing Ciri's face. He said it to the 10,000 years of waiting, and the engineering of the elder blood, and the weapon that had killed everything, and the survival that had been so carefully arranged, and the solution that had been so carefully built. He said it clearly and without anger, the way he said things that weren't negotiable. No, the shadows in the corner stirred, and this time they didn't stop. The shadows moved like water finding a crack, not rushing, flowing, the specific movement of something that had been contained for a long time and had found an opening and was using it with the patience of a thing that knew how to wait and had decided the waiting was over. The corner's darkness spread along the floor toward the sphere's base, toward the Forerunner standing beside it, toward Ciri. Geralt stepped between it and Ciri. His blade went through it. He'd known it would. He'd drawn anyway, because the drawing was the available response, and standing still with his hands empty while something moved toward the person he was protecting was not something his body would permit, regardless of whether the blade would work. The shadow flowed around the blade like smoke around a hand. The Forerunner made a sound, not language, a warning tone, the specific pitch of something activating a defense, and the sphere pulsed. The pulse hit the advancing shadow, and the shadow recoiled, pulling back from the sphere's light, the cold frequency pushing it toward the chamber's edges, not destroying it, containing it again, barely. It's stronger than it was, Vesemir said. He was on his feet, records abandoned, watching the shadow at the chamber's edge with the expression of someone reading a threat they couldn't fully classify. It was manageable while the sphere was closed. The Forerunner waking up disturbed the containment. Now the shadow surged at Lambert. Not physically, it moved through him, the way cold moved through a gap in armor, and Lambert stopped mid-sentence and stood completely still with the specific stillness of someone whose body had been interrupted. His face didn't change. His eyes stayed open. He just stopped. "Lambert," Eskel said. Lambert didn't respond. Eskel grabbed his arm. Lambert's hand came up and gripped Eskel's wrist with a strength that wasn't Lambert's normal strength and an expression that wasn't Lambert's normal expression. "Ard," Lambert said, not to Eskel. In a voice that was Lambert's voice, running wrong the words Lambert's, but the cadence off, the rhythm of someone else's speech patterns using Lambert's vocal architecture. Eskel hit him. Open hand, precise, across the jaw, the Witcher's calibrated restraint of a strike designed to interrupt rather than damage. Lambert's grip released. He blinked. The wrongness left his expression, and he looked at Eskel with the confusion of someone who had been somewhere else for 3 seconds. "What?" "It was in you," Eskel said. Lambert looked at his own hand. The sphere pulsed again. The shadow retreated further. "It used him," Geralt said. "It needed a voice." He looked at the retreat of the shadow. It was trying to say something. Cap, a ball, cap, a ball, cap, a ball, cap. "Ard," Vesemir said. It said Ard. He was already at the founding records, moving through the pages with urgency. In the elder speech, it means several things depending on context. Mountain, high place. But in the oldest dialect, he found the page. In the oldest dialect, it means stop. "It was telling us to stop," Ciri said. "Stop what?" Geralt said. Vesemir looked at the Forerunner. "Stop the waking," he said. "Whatever is in this chamber with us, the contamination, the grief, it was here first. It's been here longer than the Forerunner has been in the sphere. And if the Forerunner fully wakes and activates the network it built," he read further, "the network activation would purge everything from the continent's dimensional substrate that doesn't belong to the continent's original state. Everything that came through in the conjunction, and everything that developed from conjunction origin material." Lambert looked at his hand again. "Including whatever that is," he said. "Whatever that is has been here for 10,000 years. Vesemir said, "It has roots in this place. It would be," he stopped. "It would be unmade, again. The thing it feared most. Done to it again." "It's afraid," Ciri said. "Yes," Vesemir said. Geralt looked at the shadow at the chamber's edge, at the thing that had moved through Lambert and used his voice to say one word in a language none of them had recognized as a request, until Vesemir found the translation. Stop. Not an attack. A plea. He thought about what Vesemir had said. Something unmade against its will. A physical form, taken from it deliberately, as a weapon. 10,000 years in a containment field, in a chamber beneath a keep that had accumulated decades of grief and loss. And the grief had fed it, and it had grown, and it had shaped things above it, without fully understanding how or why. The influence of a consciousness with no body and no purpose except the ambient pain of everything Kaer Morhen had survived. It had made the monsters worse near the keep. He thought about that. He thought about the creature density in the valley. The specific quality of the monsters that came through the mountain passes near Kaer Morhen, more aggressive than elsewhere, harder to reason with. The bestiary notes from 3 generations of witchers consistently flagging the valley as an anomaly. He'd always attributed it to terrain, to the magical runoff from the laboratory, to the keep's history of concentrated witcher activity. He thought about a consciousness with no body sitting in the dark for 10,000 years, learning to push outward through the only medium available to it, amplifying the aggression of every creature it could reach, because aggression was the closest available analog to the thing it had lost. It hadn't been malicious. It had been communicating in the only language it had left. Vesemir, he said. The records. The thing the Didact's consciousness was before it was unmade. What was it? Vesemir read. A general, he said. A military commander. One of the greatest the Forerunners produced. It was unmade during the final conflict. Its consciousness was extracted from its body and used to run automated systems, weapons, the weapon that fired. It was inside the weapon when it fired. He looked up. It experienced everything the weapon did. Every death, every world, every dimensional rupture. And then the weapon finished and it was still running and there was nothing left to run and it drifted. For a long time, until it found this fold. The shadow at the chamber's edge had no shape, but Geralt had the specific sense of being looked at. It didn't choose this, Ciri said quietly. No, Geralt said. It didn't. The lodge arrived at the wrong moment. Geralt heard them on the stairs, the specific sound of people moving carefully through a space they didn't know, the whisper of robes on stone. The near silent footfalls of people who had spent years learning to move without being heard. He counted 4 sets of feet before the first face appeared in the chamber entrance. Philippa Eilhart. She took in the chamber in 3 seconds, the Forerunner, the sphere, the sentinels, the shadows at the edges, the founding records on the floor. Ciri standing near the sphere with the cold light on her face. Her expression didn't change. How long has this been here? She said. Longer than the continent, Geralt said. And you've been down here for... She looked at the lamp oil Lambert had brought, measured the burn rate. 5 hours, without telling anyone. We've been busy, Geralt said. I can see that. She stepped into the chamber without being invited, which was consistent with everything Geralt knew about Philippa Eilhart. Behind her came Sabrina Glavissig, Francesca Findabert, and a 4th sorceress, whose name he didn't know. All 4 of them scanning the chamber with the professional assessment of people who'd spent their lives evaluating sources of power. What is that? She was looking at the Forerunner. Something old, Geralt said. Something that was here before us, before everything. And the sphere was its vessel, she said. Not a question. And the activation we detected, the power surge that pulled us here, was it waking? She looked at Ciri, and it woke for her. Don't, Geralt said. Don't what? Think about it, he said. Whatever you're thinking about Ciri, and that sphere, and what it can do for the lodge, don't. Philippa looked at him with the expression she used when she was deciding how much of her actual thinking to show. The power signature, she said. It's unlike anything in the magical taxonomy. It's not chaos. It's not elemental. It's not any school we have a framework for. A source of power that operates entirely outside the structures that currently govern who has influence on the continent. She paused. That's not a political observation. That's a fact about what sitting in this chamber does to the existing balance. Everything in this chamber tears up the existing balance, Vesemir said. He hadn't moved from his position near the records, including the answer to the monster problem, including what the continent actually is, including what Ciri actually is. He looked at Philippa steadily. The lodge coming down here doesn't improve your position. It just means you know things you can't unknow. Knowledge is always an improvement, Philippa said. Not this knowledge, Vesemir said. The shadow moved, not toward Geralt, not toward Ciri, toward Philippa. It didn't flow this time. It moved with direction, the specific movement of something that had assessed the new arrivals and made a determination about which one to engage first. Philippa was the most powerful magical presence in the room, and the contamination had 10,000 years of experience with magical influence, and it moved toward her with the speed of something that knew exactly what it was doing. Philippa's shield went up. The shadow hit it and spread across the shield's surface, and the shield held for 2 seconds before Philippa's expression changed from controlled assessment to the specific strain of someone fighting something they hadn't encountered before, and finding the fight harder than expected. The Forerunner moved 3 steps, faster than Geralt expected from something that had been in a sphere for 10,000 years, and it placed one hand between Philippa and the shadow. The sphere pulsed. Hard, the hardest pulse yet, the cold light filling the chamber completely for one blinding second, and when the light cleared, the shadow was back at the edges, and Philippa was on one knee and the Forerunner was standing between her and the corner. Philippa looked up at the Forerunner from the floor. For the first time since she'd entered the chamber, her expression showed something unmanaged. "What is that?" she said. "Not about the Forerunner, about the shadow." "A consciousness," Geralt said. "No body. 10,000 years of accumulation, and it's getting stronger every time the sphere's containment destabilizes." He paused. "It moved through one of my witchers 20 minutes ago," used his voice. Philippa got to her feet. "It can possess." "Temporarily," Geralt said. "The sphere pushes it out, but the sphere is running at its limit, maintaining containment, while the Forerunner is active." He looked at the Forerunner. "It wasn't designed to do both simultaneously. So we have a Forerunner that wants Ciri to activate a network that ends the monster problem and costs Ciri everything she is," Philippa said. Her voice was very controlled. "And a disembodied military consciousness that's been feeding on Kaer Morhen's grief for a century and can possess anyone in this room, and a containment field that's failing." "Yes," Geralt said. "And your solution is?" "Working on it," Geralt said. The shadow pulsed at the chamber's edge, and from it came a sound, not Lambert's voice this time, not the elder speech word for stop, something different. Something that none of them had heard before, rising from the shadow with the quality of a frequency that hadn't been used in 10,000 years. It was laughing, not at them, at the situation. The specific laughter of a military mind that had just assessed the room and found something that its 10,000 years of patience had not predicted a path, not through the Forerunner and not through Ciri and not through any of the things it had been working with for a century, through the lodge. Through Philippa Eilhart, who was standing in a chamber with a failing containment field and a need for allies, and the specific combination of ambition and intelligence that made her the most dangerous person in the room. Geralt looked at Philippa. Philippa looked at the shadow. "Don't," Geralt said. "It laughed," Philippa said slowly. "A military consciousness, with no body and 1,000 years of accumulated influence, just laughed at something it realized." She paused. "That means it's thinking, strategically." She looked at Geralt. "It wants something, and it thinks it just found a way to get it." "I know," Geralt said. "What does it want?" Philippa said. What it's always wanted, Vesemir said from the floor. A body. Philippa wanted the room cleared. She said it with the specific authority of someone who had been managing difficult situations from positions of power for long enough that the authority was automatic rather than perform the tone that expected compliance rather than requesting it. Clear the chamber. Bring only essential personnel. Let the lodge assess the situation without the noise of witchers who couldn't contribute meaningfully to a problem that was fundamentally magical in nature. Geralt said no. He said it the same way he'd said no to the Forerunner's hologram, clearly, without anger, in the tone that communicated the finality before the word finished landing. Philippa looked at him. The contamination moved through Lambert, Geralt said. It assessed the room and found an angle in 30 seconds. Every person here is a potential vector. Sending people out doesn't reduce the risk. It spreads it to the rest of the keep. Philippa processed this. Then we contain it here, she said. We've been containing it here, Lambert said. He was leaning against the wall, near the entrance, jaw still slightly red from Eskel's strike, watching the shadow at the chamber's edge with the focused attention of someone who had been inside a thing and was not interested in repeating the experience. The sphere does the containment, and the sphere is running out of capacity. How long? Philippa said. Ciri answered before Geralt could redirect the question. Hours, she said. Not many. Philippa looked at the Forerunner. The Forerunner looked back at her. It can't communicate with you, Geralt said. It doesn't have a language we speak. I communicated with Ciri. Ciri can feel the shape of what it transmits, Geralt said. Not the content, the shape. Then Ciri translates, Philippa said. Ciri is not your translator, Geralt said. Geralt! Ciri's voice was flat. I can translate. She looked at him with the expression she used when she was telling him that he was managing her rather than protecting her, and she knew the difference. Let me translate. He stepped back. One step. The concession of a man who knew when the position was the wrong one and moved without pretending he'd chosen to move. Philippa turned to the Forerunner and spoke with the directness she brought to every negotiation. No preamble, no diplomatic softening, the assumption that the other party was intelligent enough to appreciate efficiency. The containment is failing, she said. The contamination is strengthening. We need a solution that doesn't require activating your network at the cost of the reclaimer. She paused. What are the alternatives? Ciri closed her eyes. The Forerunner responded, the low sound of its communication filling the chamber, the sphere's light shifting in the patterns that accompanied its transmissions. Ciri received it. There are two, she said. The first is resealing the sphere. The Forerunner returns to the awaiting state. The contamination is contained again. The sphere's full capacity is dedicated to the containment rather than split between the Forerunner's activity and the suppression. And the second alternative, Philippa said. Give the contamination what it wants, Ciri said. Lambert pushed off the wall. We give the disembodied military consciousness that's been feeding on our grief for a century a body. Not a human body, Ciri said. Not possession, a constructed form. The Forerunner can build one the same material as the sentinels, the same hard light construction. A body that can contain a consciousness without the problems of biological possession. The contamination transfers into the constructed form. The sphere's containment is no longer necessary. The Forerunner can operate at full capacity. And then we have a disembodied military consciousness in a body made of the same material that silver can't touch, Geralt said. Yes, Ciri said. That's the second alternative, Geralt said. Yes, she said again. The chamber was quiet. Vesemir had stopped reading the records. He was sitting on the floor with the open volume in his lap and looking at the shadow at the chamber's edge with an expression Geralt had seen him wear before twice. In his experience, both times in situations where Vesemir was making a decision that he understood would cost something significant and was making it anyway. Vesemir, Geralt said. I'm thinking, Vesemir said. Think faster. Some thoughts need their full time. He closed the records carefully, set them aside. The contamination has been in this keep for as long as the keep has existed. Before the massacre, before Daggerlund, before everything. The founding records say the chamber was built before the keep, and the contamination found the chamber, and the contamination has been here ever since. He paused. Every witcher who trained here, every boy who came through and survived, or didn't survive, every loss, it's been absorbing all of it. And using it, Lambert said. Using it and being shaped by it, Vesemir said. It came here as a military consciousness, a general. Whatever it is now is built partly from what it started as, and partly from a century of Kaer Morhen. He looked at the shadow. Our losses are inside it. Everything we've mourned, it knows this better than anyone alive. That's not comforting, Lambert said. It's not meant to be comforting, Vesemir said. It's meant to be relevant. He looked at Geralt. The Didact's consciousness, whatever it was before it was unmade, it spent 10,000 years becoming something else, something shaped by grief and isolation and the specific history of this place. He paused. That's not a weapon. That's not the military commander who was inside the Halo array when it fired. That's something that has been living in the same grief we've been living in for a century and doesn't know how to be anything other than what that grief made it. You're asking us to feel sorry for the thing that made the valley's monsters worse, Lambert said. I'm asking you to understand it accurately, Vesemir said. There's a difference. Philippa had been watching this exchange with the specific attention she gave to anything she found unexpectedly complex. The constructed form, she said to Ciri. The Forerunner built it now, with the sphere at reduced capacity? Ciri asked. Yes, she said. It will take the sphere's remaining capacity to do it. After the construction, there's nothing left for containment. The transfer has to happen immediately after the form is complete, or the contamination has free access to the chamber. How long is the window? Philippa said. Minutes, Ciri said. Philippa looked at the shadow. Can it understand us? She said. Does it know what we're discussing? It's been in this chamber for a century, Geralt said. It understands everything spoken in this room. Philippa nodded. She turned to face the shadow directly, the shadow that had no face, no shape, no physical form except the quality of the darkness it occupied, and spoke to it the way she'd spoken to the Forerunner. Direct, efficient, the assumption of intelligence. We're discussing giving you a body, she said, not possession, a constructed form, permanent, stable, not dependent on the sphere's containment. She paused. In exchange, we need something. Not a promise. The Lodge doesn't trade in promises. Something concrete. The shadow moved. Not toward her. Around the chamber's edge, the specific movement of something pacing, or the closest available analog to pacing for something without legs. Philippa, Geralt said. I'm negotiating, she said. You're negotiating with a consciousness that moved through Lambert 20 minutes ago. I'm negotiating with a consciousness that has been in this keep for a century and clearly has preferences about its situation, she said. Preferences are the foundation of every negotiation I've ever conducted. She looked at the shadow. What do you want? Beyond the body, what do you want to do with it? The shadow stilled. Lambert's voice came out of nowhere, all of them startled. All of them looked at Lambert, but Lambert was standing against the wall, with his mouth closed, and the sound was coming from the shadow itself. Using some resonance of the chamber and Lambert's vocal patterns that it had absorbed when it moved through him, Lambert's voice, not Lambert's cadence. Out, it said. One word, the elder speech. Lambert's voice, the shadow, at the chamber's edge. Out of the chamber, Philippa said. A pause. Out of the keep, it said. The cadence was getting closer to Lambert's as it practiced the borrowed voice. Out of the valley. You want to leave, Geralt said. He hadn't meant to be surprised. He was surprised anyway. 10,000 years, it said. In the dark. then a century in grief. The voice was steadier now, the practice paying off, Lambert's tones becoming a functional instrument. I was a general. I led armies across star systems. I planned campaigns that spanned centuries. A pause. I have been in a cellar. I did. Lambert made a face. Fair, he said, to nobody specifically. What would you do, Philippa said, with a body and the freedom of the continent? A long pause. Learn what it became, it said, while I was in the dark. What survived? What was the weapon made by the survivors? Another pause. I made the weapon. I fired the weapon. I was inside the weapon when it fired. The voice was quiet. I know what it destroyed. I do not know what the destruction produced. I have been in a cellar. The chamber held this. Geralt looked at Vesemir. Vesemir looked at the shadow. It wants to see the continent, Vesemir said. Yes, the shadow said. In a body made of hard light and programmable matter that silver can't touch, Lambert said. Yes, the shadow said, with a quality that might have been dry humor and might have been Lambert's absorbed inflections. Though your silver blade is more impressive than most. Lambert looked at his blade. That's my voice, he said. That's weird. Apologies, the shadow said, and sounded like it meant it. The Forerunner built the form in 40 minutes. It used the sentinel material, the dark plates, the hard light, the moving surface, but the construction was different from the sentinels. Not a weapon form, not the blank-faced utility shape of something built for a function. The Forerunner built with the specific intention of producing something that could exist among biological beings. The proportions adjusted, the scale reduced to something approaching human height, the surface configured for stillness rather than the slow movement of the sentinels. It built a face. Not a human face, the Forerunner aesthetic, clean and geometric, the features regular in the way that the Forerunner's own face was regular, but a face, eyes, that caught the cold light and held it. A mouth, the specific configuration of a being that had once been biological and remembered what biological beings looked like. The shadow watched the construction. The sphere's light was dimming as the construction drew on its remaining capacity, not failing. Operating at the limit of what it had left, the containment field for the shadow maintained at minimum functional threshold, while everything else went to the form. At the 40-minute mark, the form was complete. It stood in the center of the chamber, empty, the plate still for the first time since they'd watched the sentinels move. A body. Waiting. Now, Ciri said. The sphere's containment field dropped to 0. The shadow moved finally, completely, the full rush of a consciousness that had been waiting 10,000 years for a body and a century for this specific body, crossing the chamber's length in the instant of the containment's absence and entering the constructed form through every gap in its surface simultaneously. The form lit. Cold light from inside, the same frequency as the sphere, but warmer, shifted by whatever had just entered it. The Didact's consciousness changing the quality of the light the way a person changed the quality of a room by walking into it. The form stood still for a long time. Then it raised one hand and looked at it. I turned it over, examined the articulation of the fingers, moved each one separately. Adequate, it said. Not Lambert's voice. Something new. The resonance of the constructed form's materials. The Forerunner built vocal architecture, producing a voice that had the depth of something old and the clarity of something new. It looked at the room, at Geralt and Ciri and Vesemir and Lambert and Eskel and Philippa and the sorceresses. The keep is above us, it said. Yes, Geralt said. The valley is above the keep. Yes. It looked at the stairs. Then I will go up, it said. Not yet, Geralt said. It looked at him. The lodge's terms, he said. Philippa negotiated something in exchange for this. We haven't heard what. Philippa stepped forward. Information, she said. Everything you know about the Forerunner technology in this chamber, the network beneath the continent, and the Wild Hunt. She paused. The Lodge has been trying to understand the Wild Hunt for 20 years. You've been watching from a position we haven't had access to. The Didact, if that's what it was, if the record's name for the contamination was accurate, looked at Philippa with its new eyes in its new face. The Wild Hunt, it said. Yes, Philippa said. What the Lodge believes the Wild Hunt to be, it said, and what the Wild Hunt actually is, these are very different things. It paused. The information you're asking for will not be useful to the Lodge. It will be devastating to the Lodge. We'll manage, Philippa said. You will not manage, it said, but you will adapt, which is functionally the same thing in shorter species. It looked at Ciri. The Wild Hunt is coming here. Not for her. Not anymore. For the Forerunner. Geralt looked at the Forerunner. The Forerunner had gone still. It knows, Ciri said quietly. It knew when it woke up. It's been trying to find a way to tell us. Tell us what? Geralt said. The signal the sphere sent when it opened the chamber, she said. When Geralt touched the wall and the door opened and the sphere activated, it sent a signal. She paused. The Wild Hunt received it 4 days ago. They're already moving. How long? Geralt said. Ciri asked the Forerunner. 3 days, she said. The Didact was looking at the stairs. Then I suggest, it said, that whatever conversation the Lodge wishes to have about terms and information happens above ground, where we can see what is coming. It walked to the stairs. It climbed them. The cold light of its new form preceded it up into the keep, and the chamber below was suddenly darker and quieter, and the sphere stood empty at its center, its long purpose complete, the plates finally still. Geralt looked at it. Then he looked at Ciri. 3 days, he said. Yes, she said. And the network, he said. The Forerunner's solution. It's still there, still available. Yes, she said. And we have 3 days to find another way, he said. Before the Wild Hunt arrives, the Forerunner's solution becomes the only option on the table. Ciri met his eyes. Then we'd better start, she said. He followed the Didact up the stairs. The Didact stood in the great hall and looked at the windows. Not through them at them, the glass, the frames, the specific way that morning light came through old lead-joined panes and broke into pieces across the stone floor. It stood completely still and looked at the light on the floor and said nothing for 2 full minutes. Geralt let it look. Vesemir set water to boil because it was morning, and people needed something to do with their hands, and boiling water was available. Lambert sat on the long table and watched the Didact with the expression of a man trying to determine whether the thing wearing his voice was a threat or a curiosity. Eskel stayed near the door. Philippa and her sorceresses arranged themselves along the hall's far wall, not retreating, positioning. The specific geometry of people who wanted their backs uncontested. The light, the Didact said finally. I have been below ground for 10,000 years. I have been without a body for 10,000 years. I had forgotten that light. It stopped. I had forgotten that light had texture. Nobody said anything. It turned from the windows. The Wild Hunt, it said, to Philippa, because Philippa had asked what the Lodge believes it to be. Riders from another dimension, Philippa said, pursuing the elder blood. Eredin Glaz leading them. Origin unclear. Purpose assumed to be the acquisition of Ciri's power. Incorrect, the Didact said. On every point, Philippa's expression didn't change. Then correct us. Eredin Glaz was a king, the Didact said. The Ain El, his people, were a civilization that survived the conjunction in their own dimensional fold, advanced, stable, isolated. It moved to the table and sat not the way humans sat, the motion too precise, but the intention clearly to reduce its height differential and make the conversation less architectural. The Ain El found a Forerunner installation in their dimensional fold 3,000 years ago, a monitoring system, automated, still running. It paused. The installation had one standing order: locate the reclaimer. When located, deliver the reclaimer to the activation site. The chamber beneath this keep, Geralt said. Yes, the Didact said. Eredin accessed the installation. He didn't understand. What he'd found, the Forerunner language, was beyond him. But the installation's directive was simple enough to parse without full understanding. Find the one with elder blood. Bring her somewhere specific. It looked at Ciri. 1N. And he spent 300 years executing an order he didn't fully understand, believing he was following his own agenda. He wasn't, Ciri said. He was a function, the Didact said. A directive given legs. The installation used the Ainel's existing dimensional transit capability to run its search pattern. What the Lodge calls the Wild Hunt is a Forerunner automated response system that has been operating through Eredin's civilization for 3 centuries without his knowledge. Philippa was very still. He doesn't know, she said. He knows he wants the elder blood, the Didact said. He believes this is his own ambition. The installation has been running its directive through his nervous system for so long that Eredin's desires and the installation's orders are functionally indistinguishable to Eredin. It paused. This is what I meant when I said the information would be devastating. You have spent 20 years treating the Wild Hunt as an enemy with agency. It is a machine following instructions. Eredin is not a king pursuing power. He is a man who was found by a directive and has been its instrument ever since. 2. That doesn't make him less dangerous, Geralt said. No, the Didact said. It makes him more dangerous. A king pursuing power will negotiate, retreat, calculate. A directive doesn't negotiate. It runs until it completes or until the system running it is destroyed. Then we destroy it, Lambert said. The installation in the Ainel's fold. You cannot reach it, the Didact said. Nor can you reach Eredin before he arrives here. The signal went 3 days ago. He is already in transit. It looked at Geralt. The question is not how to stop him from arriving. He will arrive. The question is what he finds when he does. Ciri went to the practice yard. Geralt found her there 20 minutes later, working through a sword form she'd learned at Elendar, not a Witcher form, something older, the footwork patterns of the temple school. She was working it hard enough that her breath was visible in the cold morning air. He didn't stop her. He waited until she finished the form. She stopped, lowered the sword, looked at him. You want to tell me something? She said. The Forerunner's network, he said. 3 days before Eredin arrives. If we activate it before he gets here, it ends the monster problem and costs me everything I am, she said. We covered this. If we activate it before he gets here, Geralt said, Eredin arrives and finds a continent with no elder blood. The directive completes a null return, nothing to retrieve. Does a directive pursue something that no longer exists? Ciri looked at him. You're asking me to consider it, she said. I'm asking if you've considered it, he said. There's a difference. She was quiet for a moment. I've considered it. And I'm 17, she said. And I don't want to be ordinary. And I know that's not a good reason, and I don't care. She looked at the sword in her hand. Is it a good reason? No, Geralt said. It's not a good reason. But it's yours, he said, which makes it the reason that matters. She looked at him. You're not supposed to say that, she said. I know, he said. She went back to the form. He watched her work. The Didact found Vesemir in the archive. The old Witcher was at the record shelf, not the founding volumes, the ordinary ones, the century of accumulated Witcher knowledge in the school's hand. He was running his fingers along the spines of the volumes without pulling any of them out, the gesture of someone in a library for the presence of it rather than the content. The Didact stood in the doorway. Vesemir didn't turn around. You know everything that happened here, Vesemir said. Yes, the Didact said. The boys who didn't survive the mutations, the massacre, everything since. He kept his hand on the spines. You were absorbing it the entire time. Yes, then you know things about this place that I've... He stopped. There were boys whose names I forgot over the decades. You don't forget, anything. The Didact looked at the archive, at the volumes, at the old Witcher, with his hand on the spines of a century of records. 43 boys who did not survive the trial of the grasses, it said. Since the massacre, I have their names. Vesemir's hand stopped moving. Yes, the Didact said. I know them. Vesemir turned. Tell me, he said. The Didact told him. Every name, in order. The precision of a military mind that had absorbed everything that happened above it for a century and had organized it the way military minds organized information completely, with perfect retention, nothing lost. Vesemir listened with his eyes closed. When the Didact finished, Vesemir was quiet for a long time. Thank you, he said. I am made of this place, the Didact said. Of what happened here. I am not separate from it. It paused. I did not choose to absorb your grief, but I absorbed it. It is part of what I am now. These boys are part of what I am now. It looked at the record shelf. I thought you should know that they are preserved, somewhere, in what I became. Vesemir looked at it. That's either comforting or terrible, he said. Yes, the Didact said. I find that it is both. The conflict started at midday, not from the Didact, from Philippa. She found Geralt in the corridor outside the Great Hall, with the specific directness of someone who had been waiting for a moment away from the group and had engineered one. Sabrina Glevissig was with her. The other two sorceresses were elsewhere. The network, Philippa said. No, Geralt said. I haven't asked anything yet. You're going to ask about activating the network, he said. The answer is no. The Wild Hunt arrives in 3 days, Philippa said. Eredin is running a Forerunner directive he doesn't understand and can't control. He will not stop. He will not negotiate. The Didact has made this clear. She paused. Network activation removes the objective. No elder blood, no directive to fulfill. Eredin arrives and finds nothing. And Ciri loses everything she is, Geralt said. Ciri survives, Philippa said. Human, safe, free of the Wild Hunt permanently. She held his eyes. I understand your position, Geralt. You are trying to protect her. So am I. We differ on the method. We differ on who gets to make the choice, Geralt said. It's hers, not mine, not yours. She's 17, Philippa said. So you'll make it for her, Geralt said. For her benefit, because you know better. Philippa looked at him without expression. Yes, she said, if necessary. Then we have a problem, Geralt said. He walked past her. Sabrina moved to block the corridor. Geralt stopped. I looked at Sabrina. Sabrina looked at him with the specific expression of a sorceress who had been told to hold a position and was calculating whether the position was holdable. It wasn't. She moved. Lambert found Geralt in the armory. Philippa is talking to Eskel, Lambert said. Geralt looked up from the blade he was checking. She's making the same argument to Eskel that she made to you, Lambert said. Different angles. She's not talking about protecting Ciri with Eskel. She's talking about the monster problem. The network ends it. No more Witchers needed, which Lambert's heard as no more boys dying in the trial. She's using the dead boys. Is it working? Geralt said. Eskel is listening, Lambert said. Which, with Eskel, means he's considering it. Which means, give it an hour. Geralt set down the blade. And you, he said. She hasn't gotten to me yet, Lambert said. I assume when she does, she'll use the thing where the continent doesn't need Witchers anymore, and I can stop doing this job that I hate. He paused. Which is a good argument. Is it working? Geralt said. Ask me in an hour, Lambert said. Geralt looked at him. It's Ciri's choice, Geralt said. I know, Lambert said. The thing is, he stopped. Started again. The thing is, it's a good argument on the merits. The monster problem ends. Ciri is safe. The Wild Hunt has nothing to come for. Witchers aren't needed anymore. He paused. And, against that, is Ciri's right to keep what she is, and the principle that her choice is her choice. And those are, he paused again, those are also good arguments. But they're not the same kind of good. What kind are they? Geralt said. The kind that loses to the other kind when the other kind is standing in front of you hard enough. Lambert said, I've seen it happen. I've done it myself. I talked myself past a principle with enough stakes. He looked at Geralt. So, have you. Geralt picked up the blade again. Find Ciri, he said. Stay with her. Don't tell her about Philippa. She doesn't need the weight of it. Just stay close. And you? Lambert said. I'm going to talk to the Didact, Geralt said. About what? About Eredin, Geralt said. About what a directive does when its objective changes. About whether there's a version of this where Ciri keeps what she is and the directive still completes. He paused. About whether a general with 10,000 years of experience and a new body has any options we haven't thought of. Lambert nodded. He left. Geralt sat in the armory with the blade and the silence of a keep that had 3 days before something arrived that was not a king and not a monster and not anything in the bestiary, and that would not stop, because stopping was not in its architecture. He thought about what the Didact had said. A directive runs until it completes, or until the system running it is destroyed. 2 options. He'd been assuming those were the only 2. He went to find the Didact. The Didact was on the keep's roof. Geralt found it standing at the parapet's edge, looking north, the direction the wild hunt would come from if the Didact's assessment of Eredin's approach vector was correct. It was standing in the wind without reacting to the wind, the hard light surface of its constructed form, unaffected by cold, the way stone was unaffected by cold. Geralt climbed the last steps and stood beside it. Below them, the valley spread out in the gray morning light, the mountain passes visible to the north, the tree line below the snow level, the practice yard where Ciri had been working her form an hour ago and was now empty. You said a directive runs until it completes, or the system running it is destroyed, Geralt said. Yes, the Didact said. Those aren't the only 2 options. The Didact looked at him. You were a general, Geralt said. You planned campaigns across star systems. You understand directives at the level of whoever designed them. He paused. A directive has an objective. If the objective is fulfilled by other means, not by the system running the directive, but by another party, does the directive recognize completion? The Didact was quiet. You're asking if the directive can be satisfied without Ciri losing what she is, it said. I'm asking if a directive cares how its objective is met, Geralt said, or only that it is met. The Didact looked back at the northern passes. The installation's directive has 2 components, it said. Locate the reclaimer. Deliver the reclaimer to the activation site. It paused. You are asking whether delivery by means other than Eredin's transit system satisfies the directive. Ciri comes to the chamber herself, Geralt said. Willingly. No wild hunt required. The directive monitors the reclaimer's proximity to the activation site, the Didact said. If the reclaimer reaches the site independently, the directive registers completion. Yes. Another pause. This is theoretically valid. But, Geralt said. But the directive has been running for 300 years, the Didact said, through Eredin's nervous system, at this stage of integration. Completion, through proxy, means the reclaimer, arriving without Eredin's delivery, may not register to Eredin's nervous system as completion. To that, it turned from the parapet. His body has been executing this directive for 3 centuries. The directive completing through means his body didn't produce the release response his nervous system requires. He keeps coming, Geralt said. He may keep coming, the Didact said. The directive completes in the installation's records. But Eredin experiences the directive as a need. Needs don't resolve through logic. It looked at Geralt steadily. You understand this. Geralt thought about every contract he'd taken that should have resolved cleanly and hadn't because the human element refused to follow the logic. Yes, he said, I understand it. So the proxy completion buys time, the Didact said. The wild hunt arrives, and the installation reports directive complete, and the transit system deactivates. Eredin is freed from the directive's compulsion eventually. The nervous system integration takes time to unwind. It paused, days, perhaps weeks, during which he is a king without a directive, assessing a situation with his own judgment for the first time in 3 centuries. What does a king do when he arrives at an objective and finds the directive already completed? Geralt said. That depends entirely on the king, the Didact said, which is why I said the information would be devastating. The Lodge has been planning against a motivated enemy with a clear goal. What arrives in 3 days may be a confused man in a position he doesn't recognize, or a king who decides the objective was worth pursuing with his own agenda, regardless of the directive, Geralt said. Yes, the Didact said. Either is possible. Neither is predictable. It looked at the northern passes again. I can tell you what he was before the installation found him. The Ainel records are in the monitoring system's database. I have access to them. It paused. Eredin Break Glas was a general. Before, he was a king. He took the Ainel throne through means that the records describe carefully without approval of. He was killed for it, Geralt said. He eliminated every alternative, the Didact said, systematically, with patience. It paused. He is the same kind of mind that I was before. That's not comforting, Geralt said. No, the Didact said, but it means I understand him, and understanding is the only advantage you currently have. The proxy completion required Ciri at the chamber. Geralt explained it in the Great Hall, with everyone present, the Witchers, Philippa's group, the Forerunner standing at the hall's edge, and the Didact sitting at the table. He laid it out without decoration. Ciri goes to the chamber. The installation registers the reclaimer at the activation site. Directive complete. The Wild Hunt's transit system deactivates before Eredin reaches the valley. And Ciri keeps what she is, he said. Philippa looked at the Didact. You confirmed this. Theoretically valid, the Didact said, not guaranteed. The directive's completion through proxy means may not fully release Eredin from the compulsion. He may arrive regardless. Ander, may, Philippa said. May, the Didact confirmed. So we attempt the proxy completion. The directive registers complete, and Eredin potentially arrives anyway without a directive, but with 3 centuries of motivation and his own judgment. Philippa said, we've improved the situation from certain arrival with directive to possible arrival without directive. Yes, Geralt said. That's a meaningful improvement, Eskel said. Everyone looked at him. He'd been quiet since the armory conversation Lambert had described, and he met Geralt's look without apology. It is, he said. Don't look at me like that. A motivated enemy with a clear goal is worse than a confused man who might reassess. It's a meaningful improvement. It also preserves Ciri's choice, Vesemir said. Yes, Eskel said. That too. Philippa looked at the table, the expression of a woman running calculations that weren't producing her preferred outcome and deciding whether to accept the result or push the variable. The timing, she said finally. Eredin is 3 days out. How long does the proxy completion take to register in the installation? The Didact asked the Forerunner. Ciri translated the response. Immediate and, she said. The installation is monitoring the reclaimer's location continuously. The moment I'm in the chamber, the directive registers complete. Then do it now, Philippa said, before Eredin gets closer and the approach vector is committed. It needs to be Ciri's decision, Geralt said. Philippa looked at Ciri. Everyone looked at Ciri. She was sitting at the table's end, with her hands flat on the surface, and the specific expression she wore when she was making a real decision, rather than performing the process of making one. What happens when I go into the chamber? She said to the Forerunner through the Didact's relay. When the directive completes, and the installation deactivates. What does the Forerunner do? First and Hackis. The Forerunner responded. The Didact translated without Siri's intermediation. This time, the two of them had developed a working channel, the Didact's 10,000 years of Forerunner language contact, producing a rougher but faster translation than Siri's intuitive reception. It will wait, the Didact said. The installation's deactivation removes the immediate threat. The Forerunner's network remains available. Unquote. The activation remains possible, not required, possible. If Siri chooses to activate it at some future point, that choice remains open. If she chooses never to activate it, that choice is also open. It accepts that, Siri said. It was built by people who understood that the reclaimer had to choose freely, the Didact said. The directive was designed for delivery, not compulsion. The installation was never meant to force the activation, only to bring the reclaimer to the site. It paused. The design assumed a reclaimer who would choose to activate once she understood what the activation would do for the continent. The design assumed she wouldn't be a person, Geralt said. Yes, the Didact said. The design is 10,000 years old. The Forerunner has been revising its assumptions since it woke up. Siri looked at the Forerunner. The Forerunner looked back at her. It's not angry, she said, that I might not activate it. No, the Didact said. It is adjusting. 10,000 years of a plan meeting a person who was supposed to be a function. It is adjusting. I'll go to the chamber, Siri said, for the proxy completion. She looked at Geralt. And after that, I decide about the activation on my own timeline. Not now. Not with Eredin 3 days out, and the lodge in the keep, and everyone looking at me. She looked at Philippa specifically for that last part. My timeline. Yes, Geralt said. Philippa said nothing. Siri stood up. They went down in a group. The chamber looked different, with more people in it smaller. The sphere's emptiness more present. The geometric patterns on the walls less overwhelming than they'd seemed in the first discovery. The Forerunner was already there, standing near the sphere's base, the empty vessel of its long waiting behind it. The Didact stopped at the entrance. I'll wait here, it said. Why? Lambert said. The installation monitors the reclaimer, it said. It also monitors for interference from systems compatible with Forerunner architecture. I am built from Forerunner-derived materials. My presence in the chamber during the registration may produce a false completion to the installation detecting compatible architecture and miscounting. You'd confuse the sensor, Lambert said. Yes, the Didact said. Biological Witcher augmentation does not register on Forerunner sensors. A constructed form built from sentinel material does. And it stayed at the entrance. Siri walked to the chamber's center. The sphere was empty, but the floor's circular depression was still active. The geometric patterns around it lit as she approached, the same anticipatory illumination they'd shown when she first entered. The installation beneath the continent, wherever it was, registering her proximity through whatever mechanism the Forerunner had built into the chamber's floor 10,000 years ago. She stood in the depression's center. The patterns lit fully. Nothing dramatic, no light burst, no sound, no physical sensation that Siri reported. The geometric patterns completed their sequence and held steady for 3 seconds and then dimmed to the ambient level of the chamber at rest. Done, Cortana would have said in another story. That's it, Siri said. I can feel it. Something closed. The transit system, Geralt said. Something, she said. Something that was aimed at me. It's not aimed anymore. She paused. It still knows where I am. But it's not, she looked for the word. It's not hungry anymore. The direction went out of it. From the entrance, the Didact spoke. The installation has registered completion, it said. The directive is closed. It paused. Eredin's transit system has received the deactivation signal. He stops, Lambert said. His system stops, the Didact said. Whether he stops depends on what he does when the compulsion releases. It looked at the northern passes, visible through the keep above them. if you trace the line of walls. We will know within the day. If he turns back, the compulsion has been released cleanly. If he continues, he's coming with his own reasons, Geralt said. Yes, the Didact said. Ciri walked out of the depression. The Forerunner watched her go. The adjustment the Didact had described was visible even across species, the specific quality of a being revising a fundamental assumption, the 10,000-year plan meeting the person who was its object, and finding the person more complicated and more real than the plan had accounted for. It did not reach for her. It did not transmit. It simply watched her walk back to where Geralt was standing and stand beside him and be the person she was rather than the function she'd been designed for. Geralt looked at it. The Forerunner met his eyes. Something passed between them, not communication, not understanding, not the warrior recognition that the original story would have called out in the language the commenter had rightly criticized. Something simpler. Two beings who both wanted the same person to be safe, one of whom had planned it across 10,000 years. One of whom had been doing it for 17. The Forerunner inclined its head. Geralt nodded. They went back up the stairs. The signal came at dusk. The Didact detected it first, the monitoring system in its constructed form, catching the Forerunner frequency transmission before any human sense could register it. It stood in the Great Hall's doorway and went still in the way it went still when it was receiving something, the plates on its surface slowing to a stop. Geralt was across the room. He saw the stillness and crossed to it in 3 seconds. What? He said. Eredin's transit system has deactivated, the Didact said. The compulsion signal has stopped. It paused. The wild hunt has halted its approach. Geralt let the breath out. He turned back, Lambert said from the table. The transit system stopped, the Didact said. I cannot determine from here whether Eredin himself turned back or halted in place. The difference matters. It looked at Geralt. A man released from 300 years of compulsion does not necessarily know what he wants in the first hour of the release. He may halt, assess, and then decide. How long do we have? Geralt said. Until he decides. The Didact said, which could be hours, could be days. It paused. He has never made a decision for himself in 3 centuries. The first one may take time. Or he already knows what he wants, Philippa said from the far end of the hall. She hadn't moved from her position since they'd come back up. She'd been sitting with the other sorceresses in the specific stillness of people, waiting for a situation to develop, rather than driving it unusual for Philippa, the quality of someone who had made the calculation that patience was currently the better instrument. He wants what he's always wanted, she said. He's been told it's the elder blood for 3 centuries. That belief doesn't dissolve because the compulsion does. She looked at Ciri. He still comes. Just with his own agency now. Then we prepare for that, Geralt said. With what? Philippa said. The Witchers, a constructed form that Silver can't touch. A Forerunner who can't communicate and whose network solution we've declined to use. She paused. Against the full force of the wild hunt arriving through dimensional transit into the valley. And the Forerunner's sentinels, Ciri said. Everyone looked at her. The sentinel in the chamber, she said. The ones in the walls. The Forerunner built them as a defense. For this situation, something coming for the Reclaimer. She looked at the Forerunner, standing at the hall's edge. Ask, how many? The Didact asked. The Forerunner responded. 40, the Didact said. Lambert looked at the ceiling. 40 sentinels that Silver can't touch. In the keep's walls, the Didact confirmed. Waiting since the chamber was built, the same standby state as everything else. It paused. The Forerunner suggests that deploying them now, before Eredin's decision, establishes the valley's defensive posture clearly enough that Eredin's assessment, if he is assessing factors in the cost, show him what it costs before he decides, Eskel said. Yes, the Didact said. And if he decides to come anyway, Geralt said. 40 sentinels, 4 Witchers, a constructed Forerunner consciousness, and Philippa's lodge against the full wild hunt. Yes, the Didact said. Are those good odds? Lambert said. Define good, the Didact said. Survivable, Lambert said. The Didact considered this with the precision of a military mind that had been calculating odds since before the continent existed. Marginally, it said. Lambert looked at Geralt. Marginally, he said. Great. Outside the keep, the sentinels began to emerge from the valley walls, 40 hard light forms stepping out of the mountain stone in the dusk light. Arranging themselves across the valley's approaches in the formation the Forerunner had designed 10,000 years ago for exactly this defensive requirement. The valley looked different with them in it, not safer. Ready. Eredin came at dawn, not with the full wild hunt that was the first thing Geralt registered from the keep's roof. The spectral riders, the Naglfar, the full force that the Lodge's intelligence described as hundreds of Ain-El warriors in dimensional transit. What came through the mountain pass at first light was smaller. Controlled, a column of 40 riders in the red-black armor of the hunt's elite, Eredin, at their front. Moving at a pace that was not the charge of an assault, but the deliberate approach of a commander who had decided to see the situation before committing to it. He had stopped. He had assessed. He had come anyway. The 40 sentinels were visible from the pass, standing in the valley's approaches in the Forerunner's defensive formation, hard light surfaces catching the dawn. Eredin's column didn't slow when they saw them, didn't accelerate. The pace held, and Geralt read that specifically. A man who had already factored in the sentinels and decided they didn't change the math. He knows what they are, Geralt said. The Didact was beside him. He has the installation's database, 300 years of Forerunner records in his nervous system. It watched the column approach. He knows exactly what 40 sentinels cost to defeat. He brought 40 riders. He did the math. Levin has for me. He thinks it's even, Geralt said. He thinks he can win, the Didact said, which is not the same calculation. Eredin has never fought for even odds. He fights when he believes the outcome is certain. It paused. He believes the outcome is certain. Is he right? Geralt said. No, the Didact said. But he doesn't know about me yet. Geralt met Eredin in the valley. Alone. No Witchers, no sentinels, no backup position. Lambert had argued against it for 4 minutes, and then recognized the expression on Geralt's face and stopped arguing. The Didact had said nothing, which was its version of agreement. He walked out through the keep's gate and across the practice yard, and through the outer wall's gate and into the valley's open ground, and stopped 50 meters from the column's front. Eredin halted his riders with a gesture. He dismounted. He crossed the ground between them and stopped at 5 meters the distance of a conversation, not a combat. His helmet was off. The face underneath was Ain-El, the specific features of a long-lived elven species, older than any elf Geralt had encountered on the continent, the age visible not in lines, but in the quality of attention. The depth of accumulated experience in the eyes. 300 years of accumulated experience that wasn't entirely his. The directive is complete, Geralt said. I know, Eredin said. Then you know Ceres at the site. The installation registered it. Your transit system is deactivated. Geralt watched him. You don't need her. The directive didn't need her, Eredin said. The distinction is worth making. What do you need? Geralt said. Eredin looked past him at the keep, at the sentinels in the valley approach, at the keep's walls and whatever he could see of the Forerunner technology that had been sitting beneath it. 300 years, he said, running a directive I didn't author, believing it was my own purpose. He looked at Geralt. The moment the compulsion was released, I understood what had been done to me. The installation found me when I was 30 years into my reign. I thought I discovered it. It found me. His voice was flat. It used 3 centuries of my life to run an errand. And now it's done. Geralt said. Walk away. The installation used me, Eredin said. The Forerunner that built the installation is inside your keep. The one who designed the directive that ran through my nervous system for 300 years. He met Geralt's eyes. I want to look at it. That's what this is, Geralt said. 40 riders and whatever's behind them in the pass. For a conversation. I left Naglfar at the pass, Eredin said. I brought 40 riders because your sentinels number 40, and I wanted the approach to read as matched rather than overwhelming. I am here for a conversation. He paused. The riders are insurance. I am a king arriving at a foreign keep. Arriving without force would be naive. You calculated the sentinels to match, Geralt said. I calculated the sentinels as the opening offer, Eredin said. I am hoping the conversation makes the sentinels irrelevant. He looked at Geralt steadily. Is that possible? Geralt looked at him for a long moment. Come in, he said, without the riders. 10, Eredin said. 5, Geralt said. Eredin considered this for 2 seconds. 5. The Great Hall had never contained this particular combination of parties. Eredin and 5 Ainel warriors on one side. Geralt, Lambert, Eskel, Vesemir on the other. Philippa's lodge along the far wall. The Forerunner standing near the hall's entrance to the lower levels. The Didact at the table's head. Montine, Eredin, saw the Didact and stopped. The Didact looked at Eredin. 2 generals, different millennia, different civilizations, different forms, 1 biological, and 3 centuries marked, 1 constructed, and 10,000 years older. The recognition between them was immediate and specific, the way recognition was immediate and specific between people who had done the same work. The Didact, Eredin said. The name is approximate, the Didact said, but it will do. The Forerunner records describe you as destroyed, Eredin said. The records are incomplete, the Didact said, as you have discovered. Eredin moved to the table and sat not asking, the action of someone who had been a king long enough that sitting in rooms was automatic. His 5 warriors stayed standing. The installation used me, Eredin said. 300 years. Without my knowledge or consent. He looked at the Forerunner. Who built it? Eredin. Eredin. Who? Haven. Eredin. Haven. Haven. Eredin. Haven. The Didact translated the question. The Forerunner responded. It did, the Didact said. Then I wanted to answer that, Eredin said. What answer would satisfy you? The Didact said. An honest one, Eredin said. Was I selected? Was my civilization specifically chosen to run this directive? Or was I simply the first king with dimensional transit capability that the installation found? The Forerunner responded to the translated question. You were selected, the Didact said. The installation evaluated 12 civilizations with dimensional transit capability before finding the Ainel. The evaluation criteria were transit range, military stability, and the king's individual profile. A pause. Your profile. Specifically, Eredin was very still. My profile. Strategic patience, the Didact said. The installation's directive required a civilization that would pursue the reclaimer across centuries without abandoning the objective. The evaluation found that most kings abandoned long objectives when the personal cost became apparent. You don't. It looked at him. The installation selected you because you were the most likely to succeed, which is a different thing from being the most likely to consent. It selected me because I was useful, Eredin said. Yes, the Didact said. And the Forerunner approved this, Eredin said. A pause. Longer than the previous translations. No, the Didact said. The installation acted autonomously. The Forerunner entered the awaiting state before the installation's directive protocols were finalized. The directive's method, the selection and use of a biological king without consent, was not part of the original design. It paused, again. The installation made its own operational decisions in the Forerunner's absence for 10,000 years. Eredin looked at the Forerunner. The Forerunner looked back. It didn't know, Eredin said. Not a question. It knows now. The Didact said. It woke 3 days ago to find that its installation had spent 10,000 years making choices it would not have authorized. It paused. It is not a comfortable position. Ciri appeared in the hall's doorway. Geralt moved to intercept a reflex, not a decision. She stopped him with a look. I heard, she said. She walked in, took a position between Geralt and Eredin, equidistant. He came for the Forerunner, not me. Eredin looked at her. You're the Reclaimer, he said. I'm Ciri, she said. Something moved across his face, not the expressions the Lodge's briefings had described, not the cold ambition of a king pursuing power, something older and more complicated. 300 years, he said. I spent 300 years believing I was pursuing something I wanted, that the elder blood was a resource my people needed, that bringing you to the Ain-El was my purpose, my decision. He paused. The moment the compulsion was released, I understood that I had never decided anything, that everything I believed was my ambition was the installation's directive. He looked at his hands. I don't know what I want. I have not known what I wanted independent of external compulsion since I was 30 years into my reign. The hall was quiet. That's a long time to not be yourself, Vesemir said. Eredin looked at him. The old witcher met his look without performance. Yes, Eredin said. It is. The conversation lasted 3 hours. Not a negotiation, an accounting. Eredin wanted to understand what had been done to him, and the Forerunner, through the Didact, provided the complete record, every selection criterion, every operational decision the autonomous installation had made, the 12 civilizations evaluated before the Ain-El, the specific markers in Eredin's psychological profile that had made him the selected instrument. Lambert, to his credit, did not make a single comment about how the installation's assessment of Eredin's strategic patience was accurate, given that he was sitting in Kaer Morhen's Great Hall 300 years later, which was admirable restraint. At the 2-hour mark, Philippa asked the question she'd been holding. The Ain-El's dimensional transit capability, she said. Now that the directive is complete, what happens to it? Eredin looked at her. It remains. It's our technology, not the installation's. And the installation? Philippa said. In your dimensional fold, still running. The directive is complete, Eredin said. The installation's primary function is finished. But it operated autonomously for 10,000 years and made decisions its builder didn't authorize, Philippa said. It selected you. It ran a 300-year directive through your nervous system without consent. She paused. What does it do next? Without a directive, autonomously. Everyone looked at the Forerunner. The Forerunner had been still since the conversation began, the quality of something, listening to a long accounting of its own system's decisions and taking each one in fully. The Didact translated Philippa's question. The response was longer than any previous transmission. The Didact was quiet for a moment after receiving it. The Forerunner intends to deactivate the installation, it said, permanently. The autonomous operation is a malfunction, unquote. It was never designed for 10,000-year unsupervised function, and the operational decisions it made in that period are not decisions the Forerunner would have authorized. It paused. It is asking Eredin for access to the Ain-El's dimensional fold to execute the deactivation. Eredin looked at the Forerunner for a long time. You want to destroy the thing that used me, he said. It is correcting a malfunction, the Didact said. Whether that constitutes destruction or repair depends on how you characterize an automated system that operated beyond its design parameters. It is characterized as something that took 300 years from me, Eredin said, without asking. Yes, the Didact said. The Forerunner understands this. Another long look. When? Eredin said. Now, the Didact said, if you permit it. The deactivation takes minutes. The installation will not resist. It completed its directive. A system that completes its purpose and is then shut down is not being destroyed. It is being retired. Eredin stood. He looked at Geralt. "You should come," he said, "through the transit, to witness." "Why?" Geralt said. "Because I am a king making a decision in a foreign keep, surrounded by parties who all have interests in the outcome," Eredin said. "And I would like one witness whose only interest is that the right thing happens." He paused. "From what the installation's records describe of you, that is approximately your entire occupation." Lambert made a sound. "He's not wrong," Eskel said. Geralt looked at Eredin. He looked at Ciri. "Go," she said. "I'll be here." "You'll be here," he said. "Vesemir is here," she said. "The sentinels are here. The Didact is here. The lodge is here, which is actually the most dangerous thing in the keep right now, and therefore probably the safest place to be." She met his eyes. "Go witness." The transit lasted seconds. The Ainel's dimensional fold was not the continent. The light was different. The sky, a color that the continent's spectrum didn't contain. The architecture of the Ainel's capital city, visible in the middle distance, spires against an impossible sky. The installation was at the city's edge. Geralt had expected something large. What he found was a single room, inside an unremarkable building. The Forerunner architecture, recognizable from the chamber beneath Kaer Morhen, but smaller. The specific scale of a monitoring system rather than a waiting place, a single terminal. Screens showing data in the Forerunner script. And in the terminal's display, still active, the directive's completion status, registered, logged, archived, D.T. The Forerunner stood before it. It did not hesitate. It reached into the terminal's interface and ran a sequence that took 11 seconds. The screens went dark, one by one. The terminal's active light dimmed. The hum that Geralt realized he'd been hearing since they arrived, the same vibration as the chamber wall, the installation running, always running, stopped. Silence. Eredin stood in the silence of a room that had been running for 10,000 years and was now quiet. He looked at the dark terminal. "It's done," he said. "Yes," the Forerunner said the word in its own language, but the meaning clear from context, from tone, from the finality of the screens going dark. Geralt looked at the terminal, at the dark screens, at the room that had been the engine of 300 years of the Wild Hunt's pursuit, and was now a room. He looked at Eredin. The king was standing with the specific stillness of a man in the first real silence of his own mind in 3 centuries. No directive, no compulsion, no installation, running its needs through his nervous system. Just a man in a room where something that had used him had just been turned off. "What do you want?" Geralt said. "Actually, without the directive." Eredin looked at the dark terminal for a long time. "I don't know," he said. "I told you, I haven't known my own wants since I was..." He stopped. "I was 34 when the installation found me." "How old are you now?" Geralt said. "In human years," Eredin said. "Something near 400. Geralt thought about being 17 and not knowing what you wanted and what it cost to spend decades finding out. He tried to multiply that by 20. He couldn't do the math. "You have time," he said, "to find out." Eredin looked at him. "That is either a comfort or a threat," he said. "I cannot determine which." "Neither," Geralt said. "It's just true." They went back through the transit. They returned to a keep that had changed while they were gone. Not physically, the walls were where they'd been, the sentinels still in the valley, the mountain passes still showing the gray of a morning that hadn't decided what weather to be. The change was in the people. Geralt read it in the first 30 seconds of walking through the gate, the specific quality of a place where something had been decided in the absence of the people who should have been part of the deciding. Lambert was in the practice yard. Not practicing, standing, the posture of someone waiting to deliver information, and not enjoying the wait. What happened? Geralt said. Philippa moved, Lambert said. She had moved 20 minutes after Geralt went through the transit. Methodically, the way Philippa did everything, identifying the sequence of steps that produced the desired outcome and executing them in order without waste. Step 1 was Sabrina watching the Didact, keeping it occupied in a conversation about the Forerunner's network architecture that was genuinely interesting enough that the Didact engaged with it fully and was not watching the rest of the keep. Step 2 was Francesca taking the other two sorceresses to the chamber under the pretense of examining the geometric patterns for the lodge's records. Step 3 was Philippa and Ciri. Where? Geralt said. Chamber, Lambert said. Francesca and her people are in there too. Vesemir tried to follow, and Sabrina stopped him. His voice was flat. Not physically. She made a ward across the stairs. Vesemir can't get through without triggering it, and triggering it alerts Philippa. How long ago? Geralt said. 18 minutes, Lambert said. I came out here to watch for your return the moment it happened. Geralt was already moving toward the keep. Eredin fell into step beside him. Geralt looked at him. The girl is the reclaimer, Eredin said. I spent 300 years as the instrument of her delivery. What happens in that chamber affects the outcome of everything the installation is built toward. He met Geralt's look. I have standing in this. Geralt kept moving. Eredin kept pace. The ward across the stairs was visible, a shimmer across the doorway, the specific amber blue of Philippa's magic at its most precise. Vesemir was standing in front of it, with the expression of a man who had been standing in front of something he couldn't go through for 18 minutes and had used the time to arrive at a complete assessment of the situation and his feelings about it. She's not hurting Ciri, he said when Geralt arrived. Whatever she's doing down there, it's persuasion, not compulsion. I'd have gone through the ward regardless of the trigger if it was compulsion. How do you know? Geralt said. Because I know Philippa, Vesemir said. She doesn't need compulsion. She needs an audience that's not you, and 20 minutes of Ciri's full attention. He paused. 21. He paused. 20 minutes is almost up. Geralt looked at the ward. The Didact appeared at the corridor's end. Sabrina was still with it. She'd followed it when it moved, which meant the conversation as distraction had ended either because the Didact had noticed the change in the keep's atmosphere or because the Didact had simply finished being interested in the conversation. It looked at the ward. It looked at Geralt. Philippa Eilhart is making the case for the network activation, it said. Not a question. Yes, Geralt said. Alone with Ciri. Yes. The Didact looked at the ward. I can disable this, it said. Sabrina moved between the Didact and the ward. You could try, she said. The Didact looked at her, looked at the hard light surface of its own constructed form, looked at the Witcher medallions in the corridor, all of them still against their owners' chests. The ward was magical, the Didact was not. The medallions had nothing to report. Step aside, Eredin said to Sabrina. Sabrina looked at him. The lodge's business is not. I have been the instrument of Forerunner business for 300 years without my consent. Eredin said, I will not watch another person's choice be managed by parties with interests in the outcome. His voice was not loud. It had the specific quality of complete certainty delivered at conversational volume. Step aside. Sabrina looked at him for a long moment. She stepped aside. The Didact touched the ward. The amber blue shimmer held for 2 seconds against the Forerunner-derived materials of the constructed form. Then it dissolved, not dramatically, the way wards dissolved when overwhelmed by greater force, but cleanly, the way a system shut down when its architecture was accessed from the inside. The Didact's hard light surface was close enough to the Forerunner material that had built the installation that the ward's magical architecture treated it as authorized. They went down. Philippa was standing at the chamber's center. Ciri was at the sphere's base, not in the floor's circular depression, beside it, the position of someone who had been moving towards something and had not yet moved into it. The Forerunner was at the chamber's far wall, still watching. Francesca and the two other sorceresses were at the perimeter. Everyone looked at the people coming down the stairs. Philippa looked at Geralt. Her expression did not show the thing that had happened in the keep above the ward, Sabrina's removal from the position, the managed 18 minutes. It showed the expression she wore for every situation. Complete control, applied selectively. "You're back sooner than expected," she said. "What did you tell her?" Geralt said. "The truth," Philippa said. "The same truth I've been telling since the chamber opened. The wild hunt came, the directive completed through proxy. Eredin arrived and has now apparently assisted in deactivating the installation." She looked at Eredin with an expression that recalibrated something in her assessment without showing what the recalibration was. "The immediate threat is resolved, which leaves the continent with a monster problem that has existed for 1,000 years and a network beneath it that can end that problem." She looked at Ciri. "And a reclaimer who has the choice." "She had the choice before you brought her down here alone," Geralt said. "She had the choice in a room full of people who all wanted something from her," Philippa said. "I brought her here to make it without the weight of every competing interest in the keep watching her face while she made it. And your interest doesn't count," Geralt said. "My interest is the continent," Philippa said. "It has always been the continent. I am consistent on this point, even when the consistency is inconvenient." Geralt looked at Ciri. She was looking at the floor's circular depression. "Ciri," he said. She looked up. "What did she tell you?" he said. "What she always tells me," Ciri said. "That the continent needs this. That boys will keep dying in Witcher trials and people will keep being eaten and the monster problem will continue for another 1,000 years unless I use what I am to end it." She paused. "And that being ordinary isn't the same as being nothing. That I'd still be me, just without the parts that make me a target." "And," Geralt said. "And she's not wrong," Ciri said. "On the facts. The network works. The activation costs what it costs. The monster problem ends. In fact, she's not wrong." "But," Geralt said. Ciri looked at the depression on the floor. "I don't want to lose it," she said. "I know that's not a good reason. I know the continent's monster problem is real, and the boys who die in Witcher trials are real, and everything she's saying is true on the facts." She paused. "I just don't want to lose it. And I've been standing here for 20 minutes trying to talk myself into wanting something different, and I can't." "You don't have to want something different," Geralt said. "The continent," Philippa started, "has had the monster problem for 1,000 years, Geralt said. "It will continue to have it. Witchers will continue to address it. The monster problem is not solved by removing what Ciri is. It's managed, the way it's always been managed, by the people who do the managing." He looked at Philippa. "The continent is not Ciri's responsibility to sacrifice herself for. She is the only one who can." "She is a person," Geralt said. "Not a function, not a resource, not the instrument of someone else's solution." His voice was flat. "The Forerunner built its network for a reclaimer who was a carrier. It found a person. The difference is the difference. End. Cos. End." Philippa looked at him. "You are choosing sentiment over the continent," she said. "I am choosing Ciri over the continent," he said. "Yes." The chamber was very quiet. Eredin spoke from the stairs. "I was the instrument of a solution for 300 years, he said. "I did not consent. I did not choose. I was selected and used because I was useful." His voice was even. "The king I was at 34 had ambitions and plans and a sense of his own purpose. I do not know what any of those were. They were overwritten." He looked at Philippa. "Do not overwrite this one." Philippa looked at him. She looked at Ciri. She looked at the chamber, at the Forerunner against the wall, at the empty sphere, at the geometric patterns that had been cut into the stone before the continent existed. At the 10,000 years of preparation converging on a 17-year-old girl standing next to a depression in the floor, something moved across her face. Not defeat. Not the concession of someone who has lost an argument. Something rarer, the expression of a person who has run their position fully, tested every angle, found the resistance at every point, and arrived at a conclusion they didn't intend to arrive at. "The choice is yours," she said to Ciri. Ciri looked at her. "It was always mine," she said. "Yes," Philippa said. "It was." She walked to the stairs. The sorceresses followed. Sabrina, still on the stairs above, moved without being asked. The chamber emptied slowly. Lambert took Eskel to the hall above, reading the room correctly. Vesemir stayed his right. Geralt didn't question it. Eredin stood at the chamber entrance and did not come in, which was its own form of correct reading. The Forerunner moved to the sphere's base. It stood there and looked at Ciri and Geralt and Vesemir with the specific quality of something that had revised its model of the people it was looking at and was still revising. "It wants to say something," Ciri said. "Let it," Geralt said. She closed her eyes. The Forerunner transmitted. She was quiet for a long time after receiving it. When she opened her eyes, there was something in her expression Geralt hadn't seen before. Not the weight of the decision, not the relief of the decision, not being forced. Something quieter. "It says the design was wrong," she said. "The network, the activation, the cost built into the process. It was designed for a carrier, not a person, and the design didn't account for the possibility that the reclaimer would be someone rather than something." She paused. "It says it has been revising the design since it woke up, since it understood what Ciri was." She paused again. "It says the revision isn't complete. It will take time. But a redesigned activation, one that doesn't require the full use of what she is, may be possible." Geralt looked at the Forerunner. "How much time?" he said. Ciri asked. "I don't know," she said. "It says the original design took 11,000 years. The revision has the advantage of existing work to build from." She almost smiled. "It says it will be faster than 11,000 years. Comforting," Vesemir said. "It also says," she stopped. "It says it made an error. In the design, in the installation, in the directive that used Eredin. It says these are its errors, and it takes them as its errors, and it will spend whatever time it has correcting them." She looked at the Forerunner. "It's an apology." "To who?" Geralt said. "To everyone," she said. "In the room, above the room, to Eredin, to everyone." The installation touched. She paused. "It says an apology from something 10,000 years old is probably insufficient. It says it will demonstrate instead." "Demonstrate how?" Geralt said. "By staying," Ciri said. "By working on the revision. By being useful in the ways it can be useful while the revision is in progress." She looked at Geralt. "It's asking if it can stay." Geralt thought about a sphere beneath the keep that had been waiting for 10,000 years. He thought about 40 sentinels in the valley walls that could be retracted or deployed. He thought about the Didact upstairs, learning what light felt like on the skin it didn't have, and asking Vesemir for the names of boys who hadn't survived. He thought about the monster problem and the Witcher trials, and the long management of a continent that had been surviving since the conjunction. He thought about a redesigned network activation that didn't cost Ciri what she was. That was worth the space in the cellar. "It can stay," he said. The Ain El left at midday. Eredin's 5 riders were in the valley. His 40 were at the pass, the Naglfar beyond. He stood at Kaer Morhen's gate and looked at the keep one more time, the specific look of someone memorizing a place, the soldier's habit of recording terrain. "The Lodge will watch what happens here," he said to Geralt. "Philippa Eilhart specifically. She doesn't abandon objectives. She defers them." "I know," Geralt said. "And the Forerunner's redesign?" Eredin said. "If it produces an activation that doesn't cost the Reclaimer what she is, Philippa will want to use it the moment it exists." "I know that too," Geralt said. Do you have a plan for it? Eredin said. The same plan as today, Geralt said. Ciri decides. Eredin looked at him. That's not a plan, he said. That's a principle. Most of the good ones are, Geralt said. Eredin was quiet for a moment. The installation selected me for strategic patience, he said. I spent 300 years running a directive I didn't author. I have a great deal of patience left over. He paused. The Ainel's dimensional transit capability is not deactivated, only the installation's directive. He met Geralt's eyes. If the situation at this keep requires a response time shorter than conventional travel, provide send word. Geralt looked at him. Why? He said. Because the installation used me, Eredin said. And the Forerunner is correcting its errors. And I am a king with 300 years of someone else's purpose cleared from my schedule. He paused. I want to see how the revision goes. He walked to his riders. Geralt watched the column move up the valley toward the pass. The sentinels watched them go. That evening, the keep was quiet in the way it was quiet, after significant things, not empty, not peaceful, the specific quality of a place that had absorbed something large and was still settling around it. Ciri found Geralt on the east wall. She climbed up without asking and sat on the parapet's edge, the way she sat on every high place, with the comfort of someone whose relationship with heights had been shaped by a childhood in trees and a talent for dimensional movement and a general disregard for the distance between her and the ground. They looked at the valley. The sentinels had retracted into the walls at sunset, the Forerunner, pulling them back, the valley returning to the appearance of an ordinary mountain valley. Snow on the upper passes and tree line below it, and the keep at the bottom, looking like what it had always looked like from the outside, a place that had survived things. The redesign, Ciri said. Yes, Geralt said. If it works. If the Forerunner produces an activation that doesn't cost what the original costs. She paused. I'll think about it then. On its own merits. Good, Geralt said. Not a promise, she said, thinking about it. I know, he said. She looked at the valley. The Didact is in the library, she said, reading. Vesemir gave it access to the full archive. It's been there since this afternoon. What's it reading? Geralt said. The Witcher bestiary, she said. Every entry. It said it wants to understand what the continent became while it was in the dark. She paused. It keeps stopping to tell Vesemir when the entries are inaccurate. Is Vesemir taking that well? Geralt said. He's updating the entries, she said. Geralt thought about the Didact in the library, reading 100 years of Witcher monster hunting records and correcting them with the precision of something that had been watching the continent's development from below and had a more complete picture than the bestiary reflected. He thought about what that picture contained, about the monsters that had been shaped by the Didact's influence and what they'd become without that influence now that the Didact had a body and had left the chamber. The valley's monster density would change. He filed this. Philippa will come back, Ciri said. Yes, Geralt said, when the redesign exists. Before that, Geralt said, Philippa doesn't wait for things to exist. She positions herself before they do. So we have time, Ciri said. Some, Geralt said. And the Forerunner stays, she said. And the Forerunner stays, he said. She was quiet for a moment. I apologized, she said, for the design, for the directive, for Eredin. She looked at the valley. A 10,000-year-old intelligence apologized to me for making me a function in its plan. How did that feel? Geralt said. Strange, she said. And then, not strange. And then, she paused. I told it I'd think about forgiving it on my own timeline. What did it say? Geralt said. It said it would wait, she said. She almost smiled. It said it was good at waiting. Below them, the valley was dark, and the stars were coming out, and the keep was lit from within, warm against the mountain cold. The Didact in the library, and the Forerunner in the chamber, and Vesemir updating entries in a bestiary that was going to need significant revision, and Lambert somewhere, doing what Lambert did when the crisis was over and the quiet arrived, which was to make himself useful in the smallest possible ways, because the large ones were exhausting. The continent turned on its axis. The conjunction's remnant held its dimensional shape. Something 10,000 years old sat in a cellar and worked on its revision, and Geralt stood on the east wall of the keep that had been built over the sphere and looked at the valley that had always called Ciri home without her knowing why, and thought about what it meant that the calling had been designed, and that the designed thing had found a person rather than a function. He thought it meant the design was wrong. He thought it meant the person was right. That was enough. Indeed, more stories await.